Hi there, quick disclaimer. What you're about to see was me stuck in a traffic jam for about an hour, just putting my missives out to the world, because I want to write, but honestly, I get so bogged down rewriting and editing myself. It's like I'm working on a final draft when I'm working on a rough draft anytime I try to write. So I find vlogging and podcasting to be very liberating. I get a lot out of it, and that's all that matters. If you get something out of my words, I hope it's of great benefit to you. And if not, I hope it's at least entertaining to watch me struggle with mortality, wrestling with all of the foibles of mortality, and striving to be ye therefore perfect eventually, as President Holland put it so beautifully. Anyway, I have ADHD, which was not diagnosed until I was almost 40, and I don't even know if I've mentioned that before publicly or not, but I'll just put that out there right now. So I went back and reviewed this video that I made while I was stuck in practically a standstill, and it took me an hour to travel about a mile, maybe two miles, I don't know, really not that far. Anyway, I did make it to play rehearsal safely and back home safely, and now I'm gonna try and get some shut-eye and then get back up there for play rehearsal again tomorrow morning, real bright and early, or actually I should say this morning, since I don't have to work tonight, because I work nights. But I have a massive sleep deficit, so I'm going to try to catch up on that right now. Anyway, look, too long didn't watch, too long didn't read. I just finished Heather Gay's book, Bad Mormon, and so my initial reaction, my initial impressions of her and so many people that I know and love who are like her, who have fallen away from the church for any number of reasons. And I really, really, my heart goes out to those who have felt not welcome, not wanted, not needed, or full-on repulsed by the church. And I cannot blame you, because, and I start to talk about it in this video, but I get sidetracked. And that's the other thing. I get sidetracked so many times. There are so many loose threads that I never really finish my thoughts on. And I mean, I'm actually surprised. This is an exercise that's sort of teaching me to get back. I would do a lot better if I were a broadcaster, as long as I had a sidekick who could help me stay on track or circle back to my original points. But I'm not gonna interject my finishing thoughts into this video. What I'm gonna do though is I'm going to just put this up there and make notes, and I'll try to get back around to finishing some thoughts. But there is one thing that one thought that I want to finish. I was talking about my grandparents in South Africa. They were anti-apartheid, and so they were sort of they themselves were being oppressed in South Africa. And that is a big reason why they ended up immigrating to America, as I talk about later. So I want you to understand that I have always been anti-apartheid and pro-integration. And I think, well, anyway, I think things can be taken out of context so easily. And unfortunately, a lot of my unfinished thoughts can be taken out of context, taken the wrong way. So I want to be very clear about that. I'm not super into wokeness and DEI and all this stuff that the MAGA movement seems to have been sort of a backlash against, or a pendulum swinging the other way. I'm not into it, but I'm also not super against it either, right? But I really am pretty centrist on a lot of my things. I say I'm a small L libertarian. What I mean is socially, I'm pretty liberal, but fiscally, I'm super conservative. So I will probably have to vote on the most financially pragmatic solutions ultimately on any given thing that I'm allowed to vote on. All right, enjoy, have fun. I will try to edit as much as I can out of the pauses and things like that. All right. A pleasant Labor Day weekend to one and all. Normally I wouldn't recommend doing this, but I am in a complete standstill on the freeway, and I'm averaging about 2 miles an hour. I could honestly jog where I'm going faster than I'm gonna get there in my car. My average miles per gallon has dropped from 45 to 36.5. So, and my understanding is there's a tipped over semi truck up ahead. So, yay, welcome to Labor Day weekend, y'all. It's Friday evening. I was supposed to be at play rehearsal half hour ago. We're doing our costume parade tonight. And I was going to be late anyway because, oh, here we go. Now we're moving. Because I had to go and secure one article of clothing on the way to costume parade tonight. And that took just a little longer than I meant for it to. But I think I'm all set. I'm ready. I have about 3, possibly 4 costume changes in Bye Bye Birdie. And by the way, please come see it. Bye Bye Birdie, NorthOgden.com if you want more information or to buy tickets. We will be performing at Barker Park Amphitheater in North Ogden. They just outfitted it with brand new lights and sound. And so we'll be going from September 10th through 20th. So that'll be fun. I get to play a New York City policeman and a Sweet Apple, Ohio policeman. But I'm gonna go more Andy Griffith and Mayberry in the Sweet Apple part. So we'll see how it goes. Oh, interesting fun fact. I bought one of those old-timey police nightsticks on Amazon. Yeah, you can get one on Amazon, but you're not, okay, ever since unfortunate things that happened in the LA riots in 93, police have been verboten from carrying nightsticks. So now they have those telescoping Kubaton, those batons, which, I mean, I'm sure they can still do plenty of damage with those, but they're not as hefty as a nightstick. So, but anyway, I bought one because it is marketed under a completely different concept. It is marketed as a trucker's tire thumper. What you do is you take your tire thumper, which looks exactly like a police nightstick, and you thump every tire and make sure it's fully inflated. It's quick and easy to check your tire pressure if you're a trucker. I suppose you could do it with any tire, really. Easier than, taking a gauge around to all 18 wheels. Excuse me. I believe they're known as 18 wheelers. So I'm having an interesting time. I just finished listening to, the title of the book is Bad Mormon by Heather Gay. She's one of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And I have no interest in trashy reality TV, so I've never, I like Star Wars and Star Trek. I like big budget action films and high concept. So really, any kind of reality TV is a massive waste of my time. But I am very intrigued by Sister Gay herself, or I should say former Sister Gay, I guess by choice. I don't know. She doesn't say she was ever excommunicated. I think she just kind of like voluntarily left the church. Anyway, we have some similar backgrounds, and I feel like she's in many ways my spirit twin sister. But I actually have a twin sister, not a literal twin sister, but my sister who was born exactly 2 years to the date after I was. But I feel like Heather Gay is the kind of person I would have become had I had different parents. I had parents who took the time to understand me, and especially my dad would, if I or any of my siblings ever had questions about anything, he wouldn't just dismiss us. He would sit down with us and he would talk to us like we were rational adults, not stupid kids being smartasses, not just obnoxious little brats trying to stir the pot. He knew we had concerns. Bedenken ausräumen, resolve concerns. That's part of the missionary pattern that I had when I was on my mission in Germany. Resolving concerns. He was a master, they called it the commitment pattern. He was a master at the commitment pattern, and it hadn't even been invented yet. Now, thinking back, let's see, the commitment pattern, you start with building relationships of trust. We called it Brot because Brot is also the German word for bread. So you bake a little Brot, build relationships of trust, and then at some point, Bedenken ausräumen, resolving concerns. So here's the thing about being a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, especially in Europe. Every one of your investigators, who we now call friends, not investigators, but they were investigating the church, so we called them investigators. Every one of them, almost without exception, has word of wisdom issues. Most likely they drink beer or wine regularly. They probably smoke. People love smoking in Europe. The kind of not smoking for health reasons thing that swept across this country over the past 20 years or so, 20 or 30 years. I don't think that really hit Europe too hard. From what I hear. I don't know. I haven't been over there recently. It hasn't been about 30 years since I was over there. But, I mean, every time I walk past a cloud of secondhand cigarette smoke, I honestly get nostalgic for Germany. It's kind of nice. I like it. I have no desire to actually try smoking, but I do like it. But it's either going to be the word of wisdom, or it's going to be chastity, or it's going to be tithing. And that's for people who hear about the first vision and read the Book of Mormon and pray about the Book of Mormon and get a testimony of these things, that God the Father and his beloved Son, Jesus Christ, really did come and visit 14-year-old Joseph Smith in the Sacred Grove outside of Palmyra, New York, upstate New York. And that everything according to his official, printed, endorsed by the church testimony about the coming forth of the Book of Mormon and the church, they believe it. They have no problem with it. And why shouldn't they? If we had prophets back in Old Testament days, and we had apostles in Christ's day, and for the first 100 years or so of ancient Christianity, why wouldn't we have them today? Why would God close the heavens? All right, but that's neither here nor there for the purposes of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is these guys were true believers, and they still couldn't get baptized because they had issues with word of wisdom, chastity, or tithing. Usually, probably in that order. Well, I don't know, chastity and word of wisdom both. It's a funny thing about America and Europe. In America, we're all prudes about sex. And in Europe, they're all prudes about violence. So we, especially I've noticed in Christian communities, what you might term the Bible Belt and the Book of Mormon Belt, we have no problem with Die Hard or Terminator or straight up action violence movies, as long as they don't have any nip slips in them, you know? No nudity, no sexual overtones, no innuendo. By the way, innuendo, that I believe that is an Italian suppository. Was that? Anyway, they don't have anything sexualized. It's just violence, and it's probably justified violence. And by the way, the Book of Mormon is loaded with what you might term R-rated violence, and justified, and you know, you read about Captain Moroni, and Helaman testifies that Captain Moroni, who was a battle-hardened General Patton of a Book of Mormon warrior, who was basically being judge, juror, and executioner for all the kingmen who were threatening religious liberties amongst all the Nephites. Helaman says, if all men had been like Captain Moroni, the gates of hell would be closed forever, and the devil would never have power over the hearts of the children of men. And so, I'm sorry. There's a lot of peaceniks, maybe, who think Captain Moroni is homicidal, but they completely believe everything else in the Book of Mormon. They're all about the third Nephi parts of the Book of Mormon, and maybe the King Benjamin part of the Book of Mormon, but they kind of don't really ever read any of the other parts. Okay, but anyway, the United States of America is founded on violence. The tree of liberty must be refreshed by the blood of patriots from time to time is one famous, I believe, Jefferson quote, or one of the founding fathers. Okay, so somebody asked me, what do you think about gun control and the Second Amendment? And I said, well, it's kind of a moot point. If there wasn't a Second Amendment, there wouldn't be a United States to begin with. If the colonists had not taken up arms to revolt against the British, no taxation without representation, I believe, was the driving engine. At least that's what the history books tell us. The ones I read, not the rewritten, retconned DEI history books. But anyway, point being, for most Latter-day Saint Christians, as well as other Christians, most in America, it's going to be about R-rated violence is fine as long as there's no R-rated sex. And that was my point. The opposite is true with Europe. They've had thousands of years of bloodshed, centuries of bloodshed, and they are over portrayals of violence in the movies, and they have no problem with nudity. And I mean, I'm sure their definition of pornography is very different from the run-of-the-mill, middle-class American definition of pornography. My point being, there are a lot of people out there who are like those investigators, friends of the church, who, if they weren't hung up on addictions involving the word of wisdom or the law of chastity, would be front row Joe every Sunday in sacrament meeting and would be attending the temple regularly because they would have a temple recommend, and they wouldn't be out trying to say stuff like, oh, it's just so weird what we do in the temple, and the whole Joseph Smith story is just so weird and gross, and they wouldn't be wrestling with the stuff they're wrestling with, I'm saying. So, and I don't know what I'm advocating here. I know we have to have standards, but I'm just going to put this out there. The word of wisdom was not a requirement back in the earlier days of the church, let's say 100 years ago. I don't believe, if I understand correctly, the word of wisdom was not a requirement for a temple recommend until Joseph F. Smith, which would be the 6th president of the church. And that goes also along with the whole thing about restricting who can hold the priesthood, and therefore who enjoys the blessings of the priesthood. When Joseph Smith was the prophet, everyone was ordained an elder in the church, no matter what race or cultural background. Everyone was. And then it was after the saints were expelled from Missouri and expelled from Illinois, and they literally had extermination orders and laws on the books that made it legal in the United States of America, where religious freedom is guaranteed by the First Amendment, made it legal to kill members of what was then known pejoratively as the Mormons or the Mormon Church. I'm just going to speculate that the restriction on priesthood went into place after the trek out west. And if you want to come to terms with the restriction on priesthood, Thurl Bailey, his conversion story is pretty striking. And I have listened to Joseph Freeman, who was the first black member of the church ever to be ordained to the priesthood after the restrictions were lifted. And he is just filled with love and joy and forgiveness for any of those slights of the past. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I think a lot of times people are looking for reasons for the church to not be true because they can't overcome their addictions. And I understand that. I have been, when I finally realized I had a sugar addiction, I realized I have been very, very blessed that wasn't against the word of wisdom, because I've crammed about 100 years worth of sugar consumption into my first 50 years of life, of mortality. So I decided I'm gonna just abstain from sugar. I've been going to Overeaters Anonymous, which basically follows the pattern of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I just decided, all right, sugar is my alcohol. And it was really hard at first, but I'm about 5 months sober now, and I'm pretty confident, one day at a time, I'm never going to have to wrestle with that. But let me just tell you, not everybody is the same. For some people, alcohol is different, right? Some people can hold their liquor, and other people, it is going to drive their souls. It's going to be alcohol in the driver's seat and not them. So I'm coming up on five months. I've got a welcome token or chip, a 30-day chip, a 60-day chip, a 90-day chip, and so in about a month I expect to get my 180-day chip. And I take those chips and I have them in my pocket, and I hold them lovingly. And they've all been passed around our little groups when they were given to me, and all of my fellow Overeaters Anonymous rubbed off some love onto each of these chips. So I carry their hopes and desires with me when I when I pray day to day in general, but also I hold them in my hands during sacrament meeting, during the ordinance of the sacrament, as I pray for help from my higher power, which is the God of Israel and the God of nature, as Thomas Jefferson put it. But he is Jesus Christ, the resurrected Jesus Christ, who is the God of the United States of America. This land will never have a king, because the Lord will be our king. And I pray that always will remain the case. Anyway, but all that being said, I totally feel such a kinship to Heather Gay. Her upbringing, very similar. Always the heavy, obnoxious clown, class clown type, which is what I was, you know. And again, I think if my parents had handled things differently with me, I probably would be. I would definitely be chasing Hollywood fame and fortune as the most important thing in my life. You know, symbolically, I suppose, selling my birthright for a mess of Hollywood pottage, as Esau sold his birthright to Jacob for a mess of literal pottage. And I 100% get it. I get that. I mean, I wrestled with atheism at one point. I was looking for reasons for the church not to be true. And I won't go into why, but I was wrestling with atheism because I read The Salmon of Doubt by Douglas Adams. And believe it or not, for a funny guy writing the last book before he died, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy author made some pretty compelling points for atheism. And he said, I am not an agnostic. I want to be clear. I am an atheist, and let me explain the difference. An agnostic doesn't know whether or not there's a God. I am convinced there is no God. And that got me thinking, well, you have to exercise at least as much faith to believe that there's no God, like to be convinced there's no God, as you have to exercise to be convinced that there is a God. And I got to the point where I basically realized, well, if I hadn't been born LDS, and I hadn't had the parents that I had, especially the father that I had, would I have remained with the church? And the answer comes back over and over, not bloody likely. I am not the culture's biggest fan. And I'm also not a fan of how the international flavor of the church is changing the parts of the culture that I did love, that I grew up with. Sort of more the David O. McKay, Ezra Taft Benson, W. Cleon Skousen elements of the culture, Hiram W. Smith. Basically, every step of the founding of the United States of America was hand of the Lord. And English is the mother tongue of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. I believe in American exceptionalism, not supremacy, but exceptionalism. And so it's hard for me to get with the program on the sort of hippy-dippy, not liberal, but left-wing attitudes that have crept into the church over my my whole adult lifetime. Honestly, ever since Gordon B. Hinckley essentially became the prophet and gave a pass to Bill Clinton. But you have to understand, like, I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy and not only be in the Air Force Academy, I wanted to be the valedictorian of my graduating class, and I had it all figured out. I was gonna be the valedictorian of my graduating class, and I was gonna fly jets, but I was also gonna fly strato tankers so I could go fly planes. But I was also gonna go to med school. And I was also going to be an astronaut. I was going to do all these things, and I had undiagnosed ADHD, which made none of this possible. I'm surprised I was able to go out on a mission, but I suppose if I'd had an ADHD diagnosis, I wouldn't have gotten to go to Germany on my mission. And I lived in Germany when I was a kid for 3 years. That was awesome. And by the way, servicemen's wards are so wonderful to me. They're not like any other ward. And ward, I mean local congregation of the church. They're different. You are so outnumbered by and you are the other. You're othered. It's exactly the opposite of living in Salt Lake City or along the Wasatch Front. What used to be called the territory of Deseret back in the day. From Idaho out to San Bernardino, California, and down into the northern colonies of Mexico, and east to Denver and the Rocky Mountains. I think Deseret was a big swath of empty, unsettled land where the pioneers settled. If you don't already know church history. Well, moving along. Probably not averaging 2.5 miles an hour now. We're probably averaging 5 to 6 miles an hour. So, yay. That's better. Still slow and go. I haven't come across the aforementioned overturned semi yet. I've forgotten all the points I'm making, that this is a problem with the ADHD. So, but the nice thing is I have many more stupors of thought, which probably keep me out of trouble. But I will say this, ultimately, and this is back when my dad was still alive, and I asked him about all the questions I had when I was wrestling with atheism, because he had wrestled with atheism when he was in college. So I asked him all the questions, and he got to the point where he didn't actually have answers for me anymore. That were logical constructs. We got right up to the leap of faith part, and then that was where my mom's testimony took over, because she was 18 when she was studying music in London, and that's where she found the church. And then she ended up being the only member of her family to embrace the restored gospel. Well, part of that was she was living away as a young 18-year-old, so she wasn't around her family. They were all back in South Africa and stuff. And then by the way, my grandparents finally immigrated to America. We sponsored them. My mom was a naturalized citizen by then. I was born in this country, and my dad was a U.S. citizen. So I have a lot of opinions about legal versus illegal immigration. and I'm sorry, they're going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. So I'm not going to express them here, but just trust me. Every opinion that I have studied it out long and hard. Okay, I'm not a knee-jerk reactionary, and I am probably the definition of middle of the road. Okay, I'm a libertarian, small L, not big L, but I probably should become officially a libertarian and at least just try to change the, they keep trying to gerrymander the congressional maps. And I think that having a viable libertarian party that focused on state house races and didn't worry too much about the national races really gotta get the states so they're not flippable anymore. You got good Utah Democrats that get to Washington and then they immediately have to caucus with the really corrupt ones from New York and California who are bought and paid for and cannot in too deep. And then these guys get in too deep and all those secret combinations take over. But if you had third-party representation in all of the state houses, that would begin to seep into the U.S. Congress, and then that would make it so that there was actually deliberation openly on the floor of both houses of Congress. And we should repeal the 17th Amendment and have the states decide how to send senators to Washington, either chosen by the state houses, legislative houses, or by popular election, but that should be up to the state. That is federalism. That's real federalism. The Senate was supposed to be a House of States Representatives, but now it's a glorified House of Representatives because they're all elected by popular vote, just like the other chamber. So, and absolutely, I believe in term limits. Term limits for everybody, for members of Congress, for members of the Supreme Court. Absolutely, the Liberty Amendments. Okay, I see the flashing lights up ahead. We're pinching down. I'm going to be ready to end this video in a second because I'm going to gun it. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to create a power vacuum for all the rubberneckers to get sucked into and clear this jam faster. I'm not stuck in traffic. I am traffic. All right? When you're stuck in a traffic jam, don't say I'm stuck in traffic. Say I am traffic, and I'm gonna drive like a champion. I'm gonna clear out of here at the earliest opportunity, as fast as I can, so that I am not creating traffic for others to get stuck in. That's my ultimate message. Also, I don't know. I think it would be nice if they could have a little more latitude for people to get their temple recommends and still work on overcoming addictions. I feel like that would be more in line with the spirit of the atonement of Jesus Christ. Then, oh, you dirty dog. Dirty dog. What a jerk. What a jerk. That's what we call a super butthole, but we don't say butthole, we say something else. Anyway, don't be that guy. Drive like a champion. All right, I'm just about around this mess. Maybe I'll grab some footage of it as I drive, but I'm gonna get ready to clear the field as soon as I can. I may or may not be back. Here we go.